January 27th, 2025 at 6 p.m. Roll call.
Blackwell,
Present.
Campbell,
Present.
Collins,
Present.
Dockery,
Present.
Yossi,
Present.
all present, Your Honor.
All right. Looking for a motion to approve our agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Campbell, second by Blackwell. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Ayes have it. On to number 3, new business. 3A, fiscal year 26 tax levy discussion. Nevada?
Thank you, Mayor. So I passed out some handouts and a budget book to everybody for tonight's meeting. And just to reiterate, these numbers will still change a lot. They're going to be different from what you received in your email last week. And they'll continue to change based on the tax levy discussion, what the council decides to move forward with for that rate. Looking at the union negotiations and what those rates are going to be, and just some different variables that are going to impact the numbers in the budget. So starting with the tax levy, you'll have a packet that shows the tax levy worksheet. Pull it up on the screen that we have now. So the first thing I want to point out is that this year, the city of Eldridge, our taxable growth for our non-TIF taxable valuations grew by 4.81%. So that makes us a tier 3 city with the new House bill that caps and reduces your revenue based on your growth. So we are looking at a 2% revenue reduction based on that taxable growth. I believe it's anything between 4 and 5.99% that falls in that tier 3. Last year we were the tier 4 and had a 3% reduction, so a little less reduction this year. The recommended tax levy, or I guess the one that's used as the basis for the budget for what you see so far, is at 8.01. That's up from last year where we were 7.98. But if you look through your packet, you're going to see a couple of different calculations, all the way from 7.93 up to 8.05. And all of those are going to be changing the amount of the liability, property, and self-insurance property tax levy. We don't have room to adjust our combined general fund levy. That's going to be capped at the 6.83576. So what we can work with to increase our revenues using those other allowable levies. So this year, asking for 314,000 would put us up to 8.01. So still increasing that tax levy just a little bit, but not anything too significant as far as the increase from last year. It's about the same increase that we looked at last year. Questions or initial thoughts on max levy? Or you'll also see in the packet that has the different options for you. You'll see the what that looks like for each household. Let's see if I can pull it up here. So you'll see your tax levy options. That's going to show you where we were over the past fiscal years. Our rollback this year for the residential rollback is at 47.4%. So this will show the increase for the proposed, like I said, the budget basis as of January when we started creating this general fund revenue using the 8.01. If you look at the bottom of that page, you'll see again, some different options if you were to move that tax rate around a little bit, what it would do for the revenue that we're bringing in. You don't see a huge significant change from just a couple of cents. Ends up being about $10,000 to $15,000 for every 2 cents. And then it will also give you an illustration for the home values in our community at these proposed tax rates, what those property taxes are going to look like for the values of home at that tax levy.
How did we determine to use the 8.01? I don't remember having any discussion on who picked that number.
I used it just as a conversation starter to show if we did the same increase from last year, and then providing the different numbers if you wanted to go up or down, what that would do. Because we have to have an amount to put into the budget to be able to prepare a draft for you. We have to know what that revenue is gonna look like, so we've got to pick some draft number. So for this year, just staying in line with the increase from last year, choosing 8.01. Again, that will fluctuate and change what the final draft of the budget is gonna look like based on what the council wants to do with the levy. That will change the general fund revenue by approximately the amount shown, depending on which tax levy you would be looking at.
What does our assessed valuation increase? Or a taxable valuation for GRF and for the debt levy?
I can pull that number for you from last year. I don't remember exactly what the taxable valuation was, but it was a 4.81% growth. So if you look at our non-TIF taxable of $463,917,321, that's 4.81% above where our valuations were last year. Sorry, that is the valuation from last year. So the 4.81 is the 484,678,884 at the top of that. So this was our TIF taxable growth last year, the 463 million. The 484,000 is our taxable valuation this year. These numbers are auto-populated by the state.
Okay. And do we have a round idea on our taxable value for our debt levy?
So for our debt levy, we are able to levy what we have that is to be paid out of the debt service fund. I don't know if I have that worksheet pulled up, but what we have budgeted to come out to pay for the debt services for this year is $279,220. So we'll be levying $278,415 to go towards those that are coming out of our debt levy.
So will that lower our levy towards our tax asking?
Will it lower our levy? It'll be added to our combined general fund levy. So what we're levying is 0.52427 from the debt service levy. So we would add that to the 6.83576 for the property tax in the combined general fund levy. And then this is the liability, property, and self-insurance. This is the levy that we can move back and forth a little bit to increase or decrease revenue. And that would add, and then you also have to factor in the ag land, which is that set. There's a set amount of the 3.00375.
I guess my question is, the amount that we're doing against our debt levy, that millage rate, is that gone up or gone down from last year?
So last year it was at 0.4679. This year it's at 0.52427. But that's based on the payments that we owe that are being levied by the debt service. So that's predetermined as well. We put our debt service into that levy worksheet and it auto-populates that for us.
Okay.
Nevada, what was our overall growth last year and what were we capped at by the state?
So last year, our overall growth, I can try and pull up one of the old sheets for what our taxable growth was, but we were in the tier 3. So that would be falling anything above the 5.99% valuation growth. I think we were, I'd like to say we were at like 11 or 14. We were well above
Okay.
that top tier, which is the tier 4. So we were reduced by 3% for our revenue last year. This year we were looking at that 2%. So that bill is expected to go through fiscal year 29. At that point, the goal is to have every city for the combined general fund levies at 8.1 or below. We'll see, but that's at fiscal year 29, but that's the goal of this particular legislative action and the capping on that. So they don't see that, they don't anticipate that going past fiscal year 29 right now, but it'll just depend on how that works and whether there's changes in that in the meantime.
Are we limited $8.10 now?
The limit on the combined general fund levy, so anything within that combined general fund levy is 8.1. We are at 6.83576, so we're well under that.
I mean, long-term, the other cities, the only way they keep getting money is by their servicing debt.
Well, they're using these other non-voted permissible levies, so they're doing things like your IPERS and your police retirement, your FICA, fire retirement, other employee benefits. Those are all things that you can levy above and beyond the 8.1. Emergency management communications, if they have levying power for that. Liability, property, and self-insurance, that's where we levy our amounts above anything above and beyond the 8.1. So those are the areas where you'll see the other cities leveraging more from the property taxes, getting up to 16, 17. I think some of them are even above 20. So even at 8.01, we would still be the lowest in the county, but other than Donahue. Which you'll be able to see in, again, some of these sheets may change, but those introductory sheets in the budget that you have printed will show where we fall as of the last year. Yep. You'll see that comparable to the other tax rates in comparable cities throughout the state, and then any cities above 5,000.
Loretta, I was jotting down notes when you said that. If I understand you correctly, our tax rate, so we're the second lowest within all Scott County.
So this is not just Scott County, these are just local city tax rates. So we've got like Clinton and some out of Muscatine, I believe, too. But we are the second to lowest. The only one lower than us is Donahue. Yep, and above us goes Princeton, Long Grove, Walcott, Buffalo, Bluegrass. So a lot of cities with considerably smaller populations, which I mean, we are successfully keeping our tax rate low.
Well, and out of the whole group, there's only 4 cities that are below 10%.
Correct.
And that's attributed to our growth. That's allowed that. I mean, if you look at total levies all city, we're 873 according to this document out of 940. Right. Next year will be 874 out of 940.
Those are all the cities in Iowa, so like the ones that are just a couple hundred people. If you go to the ones above 5,000, just that next page, out of 85, we're 84. So all the cities in the state of Iowa above 5,000, that's not just local, that's all of the cities. We are second to the lowest in the whole state.
when we're not lowest.
We need to make some improvements.
I think that one thing that we bragged about, and to hang our hat on, that Eldridge was the third largest community in Scott County, but we was always first, my understanding, within Scott County is having the lowest tax rate.
So the third fastest growing, yeah. So, but now as we are battling the new legislation, that growth is creating a reduction in revenue for us, where we're gonna have to get a little more creative and use that TIF opportunity that we have with those available funds to bring down our non-TIF taxable value. So hopefully next year we'll be able to manipulate that a little bit and get down lower, on a lower tier, or maybe not at all have any reduction in revenue, but right now that growth is creating that reduction in revenue for us.
Sure.
But if we have a 4.5% growth, as this is proposed, we have a 5% increase in our revenues.
Which we would have 7%, but they roughly shaved off about 2% of that revenue growth that we were capped at. So while we still see some growth in revenue, we don't have the actual realized growth of what we should have for the growth that we've had in our city and the property tax growth that we've experienced, that expands our tax base. We've been reduced that revenue.
They want to reduce it more.
Hang on. True.
That's the number one goal of the legislature, is reduce property taxes.
So then the question is, how do we get the capital improvements done that are necessary? And that's what it boils down to. Is
Tends what they are. Motor fuel tax will get over roughly $1 million a year. We haven't been doing $1 million a year in improvements. It's sitting there with round numbers, 2.9 million, 2.5 million in cash reserves right now. We got sales option tax dollars we can offset with some construction. I mean, there's other avenues.
Sure.
This is just specifically the general fund. You know, and the other part of that too is these other towns, we offer a lot more amenities and parks and everything else than all these other towns. So I look at us as doing fantastic. And the rollback, that was adjusted by the state because the assessors increased in valuation.
I believe the rollbacks are preset. I don't know how far ahead of time. For the residential rollback, we're actually on our last year for the commercial and industrial rollback. This will be our last year of receiving that rollback from the state.
But I'm saying the Department of Revenue determines the rollback off of the increased valuation by county assessors.
It's set to a certain amount, up to 150,000 for residential, and then anything above that is at 90%. Yeah, I don't remember, but I mean, it's a predetermined rate based on your assessed value, whatever that assessed value is.
I always thought that was a check and balance against the local assessors. Because everybody in Scott County has been increased substantially over the last 3-4 years. Even not just new homes, but the older homes too.
right.
Yeah, residential, anything over 150,000 is subject to the 90% rollback. So it'll just be based off of whatever the assessed valuation is for your county. Then they have the rollback over 150,000 that kicks in.
there's things we can do now. I haven't been through this one. Went through the one that was emailed out. There's areas where gravel and sands and the street department, which is under the general revenue, we can move that to motor fuel tax.
It's in motor fuel tax right now. It was moved to motor fuel tax last year, so it's in road use.
We moved salt. I thought it was in the street department.
And some of these numbers, like I said, some of these are still have to be adjusted. We've got some wage lines and things that'll need to be adjusted once we figure out what that's gonna look like with our unions, since we don't have those contracts in place. And then there's a couple of requests that they're initially in there to see what the budget's gonna look like with that request, but those may be adjusted as well.
The refuse collection fee, or does that increase signify the contract expiring and a possible rate increase?
Yes.
Nevada?
Yep, that's set off of, we have a contract with them for what our increase is gonna be, and then that is passed on, the same increase to the customers as well, so that we're still realizing that revenue. And our contract is through the end of calendar year 25.
Okay. That's what I thought.
Yep, so it's 3%, so you'll see a 3% increase on the revenues we bring in and a 3% increase on our expenditure in the sanitation fund.
When will we start sending out bids for that? And has anybody contacted us, or has Republic or anybody?
We did have another company reach out, and I just let them know that we would reach back out to them once we get closer to that point. I'd say probably mid-year we would start looking at what those bids might be.
But they just did a contract with Long Grove for $9 a household, $10 a
Our
household.
Republic, or, yeah, our Republic is up this year, so we'll either renegotiate with them or look at other contract bids.
My point is ours is almost $16 per resident per month.
Do they have the curbside recycling too? Because that's about a half of the cost. They're pretty close with the garbage and recycling. So if they don't have curbside recycling, their rates might be different based on that.
They have curbside.
I was just in the North Scott Press this past week. Long Grove's rate.
Do we want to go into the police department budget, or is there more discussion for tonight on the tax levy or other information you want me to pull for the next conversation?
Well, the chief's here. Might as well go through it if we got time.
We can do that. For this year's budget, due to the need of some new vehicles, I tried to keep it as similar to last year's budget as possible. The changes you will see from last year's budget to this year, if you go under computer maintenance, which is 6319, we needed to bump that up due to their increasing cost with all the IT services that we have. So that one is up to 20,000. That was recommended by Letty and Nevada to do. If you look under miscellaneous expense, 6490, that is our Y at Work program for our employees. However, I did increase that $500 due to us now doing DARE and DARE supplies. So that is where that extra $500 comes from. Other supplies and materials, that's $65.99. That increased $1,600. I did that because we have a new body worn camera audit system. So basically our supervisors every 2 weeks are auditing our body cameras on all of our officers to make sure they're following proper procedures, being professional to the public, things of that nature. I think that's a big liability thing. I think that's big to have. So that did increase from 85 last year to 10,100 this year due to that. The last one will be other equipment. That's 6727. That did increase 12,000. That's due to the renewal of our flock cameras. They have been excellent. We probably have close to 10 warrant arrests already with those cameras. And we have solved a couple cases with those cameras. One in Dan's building over there for package theft with our flock cameras. So they're seeing great success. So that is where you see that big increase from last year to this year is the renewal of the flock cameras. They are $3,000 each to renew. We have 4 cameras. So the other thing we're requesting, and this is the big one, we're requesting to lease 2 vehicles and maybe purchase 2 new vehicles. We have 3 vehicles that are over 130,000 miles. Mine's about 140. Squad 821, which is the 2018 Ford Explorer, is at 147, 443. And then the black unmarked Chevy Tahoe, which is the SRO vehicle, is at 120.85, and that has been recommended not for patrol use due to, from Keith, due to some issues with that vehicle. That's why it's the SRO vehicle.
Which number is that, 511 or 314?
That is 314. 511 is my vehicle, that's at 140.994. The other vehicles we're doing pretty good on. So really, the common theme with departments across the country is they like to replace vehicles around the 130,000 mile mark, just due to the idle of the engine hours and the wear and tear on those vehicles. So that is what's right. Yeah.
I like that number better. This number says 30,000.
Does it? Well, it's 130,000. Sorry about that. But no, that's the recommended one nationwide, is to kind of start thinking of replacement once you hit that mileage on your vehicles. So the numbers you see, obviously the cheapest option is the Ford Police Utilities. Purchase, if you state bid, $45,585. Upfit is $13,279. The equipment, so basically we have enough equipment through my vehicle and the SRO vehicle to upfit 2 squad cars. That is the printer scanner, radar, and radio. So we have enough to do that with the vehicles we have now. We would just transfer that equipment to the 2 new vehicles. So that is the biggest thing, is just kind of to get a replacement plan down to start kind of slowly replacing some of these vehicles. I know it's a huge expense, the vehicles are, so that is kind of why I tried to keep everything as similar as possible to last year's budget. I know asking for 4 is a lot. If we could get 2, I would be extremely happy to get some. So, I will, if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer anything.
How many squads do we currently have?
We currently have 8. And 1 is the K9 vehicle. So if you look at that one is pretty high mileage as well. That one is at 712. That's at 143,741. I think, talking with Keith, I think we can get that to last a couple more years, as there is a lot of equipment in that vehicle that would have to transfer to another one, which would up the cost drastically. So I think we can make that work.
Could you try to possibly get all the council members, maybe you guys already have them, a list of all the squads and the mileage, the
Yep.
year and the mileage?
Yeah, it's on the back page. If you guys don't have that, I can pass mine around.
So
None of that.
Is it?
in that list of 8 squads, 2 of them have been taken out of patrol by the mechanics' recommendations, correct? Yours and the SROs?
Mine is okay.
Okay.
Mine just, it's up there in miles.
Okay.
But the one that has been taken out is the SRO vehicle. Keith said that should not be used for patrol 5 days a week. So that's why that one is kind of the SRO vehicle, because he usually just uses it back and forth to school. So.
I do just want to mention quickly for the PD budget too, that the initial numbers for wages that came in were based off of last year's budget numbers. Andrew did not have the estimated numbers yet, so he based off of what was budgeted previously, which is high. That's more than enough to cover. But I left it at that. I didn't change it yet because we don't know what that increased percentage is going to be. But if we were looking at where they're actually going to be and still considering a 4% increase, we'd be looking at 831,000. So we're going to be, as we go through this budget and tweak these numbers to the actuals, we're going to be dropping 50,000 there, which will still cover the full-time staff with that increase if they remain at that budgeted increase, which will also be decreasing then your IFRS and your FICA. So I just wanted to note that those numbers have not been changed yet, but the actual numbers are a bit lower. So we'll see that as we work through those different variables and get those actuals.
This is the last year of their contract, correct?
Yes, the contract will be up in July. Yes.
And they got a 4% this year.
They got 3.5.
I thought the last year we gave them a higher rate to buy the 4th year of the contract.
No, it went, the year prior was 3 and this last one was 3.5. So. And that will end in July.
So I think we had 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, or something like that over the last 4 years.
Yeah, it was 2.7, 2.5, 2.75, 3, and 3.5,
Okay.
I believe, is what it was.
So we looked at that, and then in the Iowa League of Cities budget workshop that they have each year, they give us some numbers to kind of help preliminary budgets. So we went to that in November, and they had an average of 3.5 to 4% for cost of living increase based on inflation. So that's why we kind of landed on that 4% for the budget for now, because that we'll be able to adjust up or down from that, but that will give us a pretty average and pretty standard number to look at our departments to see where we might land, since we don't have those numbers for that contract yet. So that's where that steady 4% that you'd see every department head use, that was what we gave them as a suggested number, and they are aware that would be moved up or down based on the contract negotiations, and that's not a set increase at this point.
So why wouldn't we go in at 3.5% versus 4?
We haven't started those negotiation talks yet, so
I
what we were
understand
doing
that.
for the budget was just seeing where we would land as at an average based on what the Iowa League of Cities recommended as the average for cost of living based on inflation. So we just used a standard number just to get a budget set.
And all the way through the budget, 4% is used, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Last year budget or inflation was like 2.5%. I know there was 1 year at 9%. In our audit, it goes back to 2017, it said the average was 2.5%. So why would we stick 4 in?
That was just based on the number that we were provided by Iowa League of Cities in our budget workshop by the Department of Management. They give us standard numbers to kind of start drafting our budget.
My point is, by listing 4% in there, if we start union negotiation, you just set the standard. And I don't think that's, my cost of living was 2.5 last year. Our own audit shows since 2017, it was average 2.5%. That's a number that we're really gonna have to consider and think about.
And we'll have to go through negotiations, and it doesn't give that any more weight, I guess, as far as those negotiations, but it does give us a good idea of what the budget would even be able to handle, because we may not be able to get those conversations done in time for this budget to be in place, and we don't want to budget low and budget a bunch of other expenses and then not be able to close a contract either. So I guess my strategy on that is to make sure that we know a standard average number that our budget could handle and be able to have some room to move up or down from that without getting into a situation where we are not a balanced budget for revenues expenditures for the current fiscal year without dipping into reserves.
I understand all that, but my point is, I don't think it's wise for us to build that fluff into that line. We can have a contingency line in the event the contract comes out far different than we anticipate.
Andrew, does this get you, I know we had talked about ideally if you had one squad per officer, you're gonna have less miles put on that squad per day. Somebody's gonna take care of that car better if they're the main person driving it. Does this setup here, does that get you to the point where you're able to do that sustainable and then spread out your
Yes,
purchases?
I think fiscal year 29, 28 or 29, it will, everyone would have their own squad cars at that point. Because right now we do have some that we're trying to not do it as much, but there are some that are running 24/7, so.
And the other thing, and I mentioned this because I've been there, but when you talk about that, that's an added perk that I think the officers would very much appreciate it.
Yeah.
And it might come down to, like you said, Brian, you got to give and take, and we can't have both. So do we want the squads, or do we want a better increase?
Well, the other part, we also have a policy that can't drive squads home if they live outside the city limits.
Sure. I'm not suggesting that, but if they park them there, if they're only working one shift 5 days a week or 6, you're gonna have a lot less wear and tear on that squad.
We are. We're also gonna have increased insurance costs, a lot of different things. There's a pro and con to all that.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody does drive it home, really, that should be taxable income on the amount from their house, the mileage.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that they take their cars home. I'd rather have them stay here, and ideally in a covered building. Because of the weather, keeping them out of the weather truly is another piece that keeps them better shape longer.
We don't have a covered building yet.
Not yet.
There is kind of a draft of a fiscal year plan out too. I don't remember how far we went out, but fiscal year 35, which kind of shows a start anyways of what it could look like to get the fleet up to each officer having a vehicle, and then being able to stretch that rotation out a little bit longer to 5 or 6 years. And then you would be on that set schedule of rotating them out, and so you would have that predictable budget amount too, just knowing that that was coming in. You wouldn't have the amount of unplanned maintenance and repair costs that you get when you get some of those vehicles well up past their useful life. So just a very rough draft of what a rotation schedule might look like, and a goal to try and get there at some point.
I mean, the bottom line is the squad cars travel X amount of miles per year total. If you want to spread it out over 8 cars or 10 cars, but there's still X amount of miles. I am not a fan of leasing vehicles. I think that's, I think we should own them.
And I just wanted to give everyone an option on that. I didn't put the Tahoe on here because that one is the highest. You're looking at, I think the state bid was around 56,000. You're looking at probably another 20-some thousand for upfit for equipment. So that one was left off because it is the most expensive. So otherwise, you have the purchase of what the Durangos would cost, the Fords or the lease. The leases, they only do those for the Durangos. So that's what that lease is for.
Have you researched at all the Dodge 4-door pickups?
We have not. I know county, their supervisors have the Dodge Rams.
A lot of people are going to those.
So no, I can get some quotes on that, and see what those might come in at, so I can do that.
And also, Chief, are you leaving off anything that we need, or that you or the force needs?
We are pretty good right now, taser wise, computer wise, most equipment, I think we're good for right now.
You mentioned that Tahoe, that we thought was too expensive to include. Is that something that is a necessity, and should you at least include it for us to?
I can put the numbers together and
To
include
review.
that. Yeah, I can do that.
This is a budget and so forth. I wouldn't want you to, jeopardize yourself or those who serve us.
Yeah, I can definitely do that.
By withholding anything that is needed.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, I can do that.
Well, what we need to start doing every year then, or the council does, to start dedicating funds from the police department to equipment replacement every year. To start building that up.
And I think we just added an equipment replacement line item in here for that possible outcome, so.
So the council has used the equipment replacement fund, and put funds in it every year, for public works and streets department equipment, so that, we can transfer it over from the general fund and put it into a line for the police department equipment. I just left it in their fund for now, just to try to track it and see where it goes, but ultimately, if the council decides to move forward with that plan, we can change that line to transfer it over to equipment replacement and pay for it out of there, and continue to add to that line. Each year, the beginning balance just kind of starts over and it doesn't stay in that fund line. So when you put it in there for a specific department, it gets rolled up into a general revenue for that fund. And it's not broken down anymore. So you have to track it in a different way on different spreadsheets or something to ensure that that money you're putting aside for PD is getting used for PD, and that big balance that builds up doesn't end up getting used for some other piece of emergency equipment that comes along.
Don't we currently only have 22,000 in that fund?
Yeah, it got spent down on the public works last year, and they are requesting some equipment this year too, to put into there and spend it down. So it's gonna be down to, I believe our starting balance this year is only 11,000 in general equipment. It's been spent over the last few years on streets and public works equipment.
And you have proposed from the GRF right now to transfer 100,000 into that.
That was proposed in the department head requests. I do have maybe some recommendations of some ways to get that equipment without taking it out of the general fund. The general fund has to fund some pretty expensive departments, and that equipment can be purchased out of different funds and still qualify for those, to be eligible for those funds. So I think we have some options there, but I wanted to leave those numbers in as they were requested by the department heads and talk through that with the council and get that direction from you on how you want to move forward with those requests.
The street department's asking for a new dump truck or plow. $260,000 or something like that. Can you give us a list of all the wish lists from all the departments so we can go through and prioritize what we think is we can afford and can afford this year?
Yep, I think this year, I mean, nothing's been cut out, so all of their wish list items that they brought forward to me at this point are in this budget. But I can pull them out and define them a little clearer, send you a list. I know there's a dump truck out of road use and a plow and salt spreader out of general equipment. I think there's a deer gator. And I believe there's another piece of equipment out of sewer. So they've got several equipment requests, but they're all worked into this budget. We haven't cut anything out from the wish list at this point.
But sewer's got their own equipment replacement fund. Their balance right now is over 300,000.
Correct.
So that's totally separate, unless there's something we can utilize for sewer and something else, and we can utilize part of that sewer equipment replacement fund to fund them.
Yeah, I just, for the sewer, the department had requests for the sewers are in the sewer budget. So I'm not recommending to pull anything from the sewer to pay for the streets equipment or anything like that, but all of those different requests from the department heads are all worked into their respective budgets.
For you new guys, that's what we're looking at, pulling the money out to build Quonset hut over by the lagoons. We're gonna pull it out of the sewer equipment fund at one time. So Chief, maybe I didn't hear it correct, the other equipment, you got the 12,000 that we agreed to pay annually for the flock cameras.
Correct.
Are you also asking for 3 more cameras, or is that?
No, that's just the renewal for the cameras we already have.
Okay, so we can cross off the 4 cameras at 3,000.
Yep, that's just the renewal for those 4 cameras at 3,000. Yep.
Do we need any more of those cameras around town?
I would recommend probably 2 more to actually have a whole virtual fence around the city in 2 more locations. I think that would be huge. We're good right now, I think. But yeah, we could use 2, if not 3 more of those cameras. Yep.
How many hits do you think you get on those cameras per week?
Per week, we're probably, it registers warrants, stolen plates, stolen vehicles. missing persons,
Sex offenders.
yep, sex offenders, protection orders. So we're probably getting upwards of probably 30 a week. Yep. Just of the various ones I just listed. Yeah,
Well worth the money.
yeah, I think so. I think so.
We're still getting cars stolen.
Well, leave the keys in them.
Yeah, that was the first one we've had taken in, I think, God, well over a year. So it's been a while.
Wow, yes.
It's our neighbor.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was our neighbor right there on South Third Street.
I thought you might, I don't know who. I didn't hear.
Chief will tell you.
But yeah, I agree with Councilmember Dockery on that. I think they're definitely worth the price and
Oh,
gold.
yeah.
Absolutely.
100%.
So we should try to figure out how to put another $6,000 back in here.
And I think we need at least 2 more
That's what I
also
was,
to do it right.
would be, yeah. That's something I would encourage you to include in the budget.
I can do that.
Okay.
I can amend that.
Do you anticipate have to send somebody to the academy this year, or do you know until you get your applications?
I don't, we've gotten 2 certified already that came in within the first day and a half. So I'm not anticipating that. I don't know who the 2 certified are yet. I just have the resumes. But I'm not anticipating having to send somebody to the academy, but
So we can take $6,000 out of that line item and get 2 more cameras.
if we have to.
There will be, like, is a 50,000 coming off of that wage line, at least. So that's,
Yeah.
to get that where we're looking at the actual numbers, so.
Well, the-
It probably, I would say 15 to 20 between the, FICA and IFRS, once we bring that wage line down.
Yeah, because 4% of the estimated's right around the $850,000. It's actually $852,365.
So looking, what we're projecting with that 4% budgeted in, and looking at where they'll actually be at, because that estimated didn't account for the SRO wage that's partly paid by the school. So we'd be looking at about 831,000 would be wages this year plus a 4% increase. So we would put in about 830 to 835 to be able to pad that just a little bit.
Well, let's just say we'll put in an increase. We're not set on the 4%.
Well known.
You don't see a need for part-time in the coming year?
No, I think we're good. Yeah, I don't think I think we're okay with not having part-time at the time.
Any shoulder injuries, knee injuries coming up? Or
Not that I know of. Hopefully no more hips, but you never know, so.
Or just these, we've been through that before, right, Brett?
Well, but your staffing levels were the highest we've ever been. So it's easier for you to,
Yeah, if we could go down 3 and still, I think, be okay. So, yeah.
Any discussion on that regarding the second SRO?
There has been, I know talking with studying in the past, I know it's been a monetary thing. I know SRO Johns is keeping the report I sent you guys to show what he does and how busy he actually is at the school. So I think using that as some maybe leverage to show, hey, look at how many times he's handling all 3 of these schools here in town.
He's not only at the high school.
He's pretty busy.
People don't realize that.
It will justify, I think it justifies a second, 100%. So,
in my opinion, it's not Aldridge taxpayers' responsibility to provide an SRO for the other towns.
yeah.
Agreed.
Yep. Yep. And I will say most of the calls he has are the high school, the junior high, and Ed White are here locally in town.
I mean, if there's a major incident, yeah, by all means,
Yep.
send them, but to do daily routines at the other school, there's no reason our officers should have to go to Princeton or Donahue. It's just not the function of our taxpayers.
Agreed.
But did you ever see Or have you had any communications on IPERS funding? I mean, years ago, we went up to 9.44% because it was only funded at 85 or 90%. With that increase, has that closed that gap? Do you ever see that going down?
We haven't had any communications come through that's indicated that it's projected to go down anytime soon. It's been at 9.44, I think, the last few years.
About 10 years now.
Yep, and it's 9.44 this upcoming year too. So I haven't seen anything come through yet.
Maybe that's what we should talk to legislature about lowering.
And I do know, talk within the Iowa Police Chiefs Association, they are starting to get involved with the legislature on the property taxes because obviously it affects everyone's budget, and that's across statewide. So I know there's going to be some movement there with the legislature on that and the problems that are affecting police department budgets, not just us, but city in general. So, so we should see some movement on that. So.
Either that or we have to slow down our growth because we don't benefit from it.
Control that border.
Council have any other questions on budget or the police chief budget right now?
Yeah.
Looks good, just add what we talked about and make sure you don't shortchange yourself.
Yep.
One thing I did notice is, you know, and costs have gone up. I don't disagree with that. The fire department, I'd like us to look at something, getting them a little more. I know we gave them the half of the gas franchise, which is about 60 grand a year, but their funding has pretty much been static. So, something to at least keep in the back of our minds if we can come up with a way to give them a little more. You know, we've also, whenever they wanted to buy trucks, we've always kicked into that over like a 3 or 4 year period. But I don't know, Dan, do you know, is there anything with buying trucks over there or any discussion?
I don't know of any discussion. I do know that we had that 50,000 in the one year, and then there wasn't the $50,000 in there this year, and I thought there should be, just so we'll be able to help them when they need it. So we're not, you know, scrambling, I guess. So, you know, when they have air packs that are needed or, you know, recertifications, we can help kick in and help.
I think the full-time employee, as far as the paperwork, has been resolved for 10 years anyways.
I don't know about that.
So for the 50,000, that was another kind of discussion item. When we're putting it in there, we're not paying it to them, we're just holding it. It essentially just gets rolled back into the general fund. It doesn't get defined as something set aside for fire. So we'll have that in reserves, or we would need to start a fund that would have its own fund aside from the general fund and put it into maybe like a capital project line or something to be able to build that. But if we just keep putting 50,000 into that fund, it's just gonna take 50,000 that we are not accounting for. We're just plugging it into the budget and we know it's not gonna be spent. And then it's just rolling into the general fund reserves, which we'll have to take a vote and pass by resolution to spend at any point anyways. So we would want to look at creating a specific fund that's going to be able to hold that money if it's something that you want to build for over future years to help with one of their expenses or something like that.
No, Dan, my point is the 50,000 you're going towards administration. We don't have to worry about that 50,000.
Right.
For about 10 years.
I thought it was a 6-year, not a 10-year, but maybe I'm wrong.
And his total was over $800,000.
But it had to be done within 6 years, was my understanding.
I think so. With that being said, do we hear a motion to adjourn our committee of whole meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Dr. East, second by Collins. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Adjourned at 6:55.
I'm good, how are you?
How's the baby?
She's great.
Awesome.
Seen your granddaughter recently?
Pardon me?
Any sleepovers with your granddaughter?